The church glowed under soft lights, violins tuning in the background, guests adjusting their ties and dresses. Everything looked like the life I had imagined. I rehearsed my vows in silence, believing today would stitch every painful chapter into something beautiful. Then my phone vibrated. A message from my sister appeared. "We're not coming." My smile collapsed. Before I could respond, another notification followed, my mother's message. "You'll be fine alone." The words drained the color from the room. The empty seats reserved for my family suddenly felt heavier than the rings in my pocket. Conversations around me faded, replaced by a hollow ringing in my ears. My wedding wasn't delayed. It was wounded. And before I even walked down the aisle, I realized I was marrying into a moment my own family had already abandoned. Guests noticed my shaking hands, but I blamed nerves. Inside, I replayed their messages like a cruel soundtrack. My best man asked if everything was okay, yet I couldn't form a sentence. The choir began a hymn, and each note felt like mockery. My fiancé's family arrived smiling, unaware of the empty side of the aisle reserved for mine. The officiant asked if we should start, and I nodded, not because I was ready, but because stopping meant acknowledging the truth. My sister hadn't apologized. My mother hadn't reconsidered. They chose humiliation over support. As I took my first step forward, it felt like walking into a future alone, not because I lacked love, but because the people who raised me refused to witness the one moment that finally belonged to me. The ceremony ended beautifully, but something inside me stayed cracked. At the reception, speeches began. My in-laws celebrated my achievements, praising qualities my own family never acknowledged. Yet every compliment echoed against the absence of my parents and sister. Chairs at the family table remained untouched, silverware still wrapped, plates empty. I watched other families laugh, take pictures, share memories, while mine turned my milestone into a punishment. I raised a glass during the toast, pretending joy, but my reflection betrayed me. I wasn't sad. They had succeeded in making me doubt my worth. The cake tasted bitter, not from sugar, but from silence. It was the first celebration of my life, where applause felt like noise filling the space where their love should have been. 3 days later, my mother finally called. Not to apologize, but to ask if I had received her message. She spoke as though her absence were a lesson, not cruelty. She explained they skipped my wedding because they didn't approve of how little I consulted them. My sister joined the call, accusing me of abandoning the family once I found happiness. Their tone was calm, rehearsed, as if they expected gratitude for their emotional sabotage. I realized then they didn't hate my wife. They hated losing control. Every decision I made without their approval felt like rebellion. They didn't see my marriage as a union. They saw it as betrayal. And for the first time, I understood they didn't miss my wedding. They resented my independence. They showed up unannounced one evening, stepping into my home as if it still belonged to them. My mother examined the furniture, making passive comments about taste and priorities. My sister compared my wedding costs to expenses she believed I owed the family. Their grievances spilled out like debts I never signed. They criticized my wife's influence, implying she took me away. My father remained silent, nodding at every accusation. My wife stood beside me, calm but wounded. They didn't come to reconcile, they came to reclaim authority. When I asked what they wanted, my mother answered, respect. But respect, to them, meant obedience. Their visit ended not with closure, but with a truth I could no longer ignore. My happiness was, in their eyes, an act of betrayal. Hoping for clarity, I accepted an invitation to a family dinner. I arrived alone, determined to find peace. Instead, I found a tribunal. They listed everything I had taken, time, opportunities, emotional investment, as though my existence were an invoice. Every sentence began with "you should have," followed by expectations no adult could meet. My sister mocked my marriage, claiming love was a distraction from responsibility. My mother insisted I apologize for choosing a life they didn't design. My father, silent until then, said I owed them loyalty. Loyalty sounded less like love and more like servitude. I left before dessert, understanding something irreversible. Families don't break in a moment. They erode with entitlement. And mine had been eroding long before my wedding day. I met with a lawyer and explained everything: messages, absences, accusations. He didn't look surprised. He'd seen families like mine before, ones that used guilt as currency. Together, we drafted a formal notice declaring I was not financially, emotionally, or socially responsible for decisions I didn't make. When the letter reached them, calls poured in. First outrage, then disbelief, then silence. They weren't grieving my distance, they were panicking over losing access. For the first time, I protected myself with boundaries stronger than apologies. I didn't sever ties. I clarified them. And clarity, to people who rely on confusion, feels like betrayal. But I no longer feared their reactions. I feared becoming someone who let them decide my worth. Weeks passed without contact. My home was quiet, my marriage steady, my mind clearer than ever. One morning, while organizing wedding photos, I noticed something strange. The pictures looked complete, even without them. My joy didn't shrink in their absence. It expanded. I understood then. Family isn't defined by attendance. It's defined by contribution. They didn't lose me at my wedding. They lost the ability to shape my future through shame. I no longer chased approval like oxygen. I breathed freely. Freedom didn't feel empty. It felt earned. My story didn't end with abandonment. It began there. Sometimes you don't get a supportive family. Sometimes you become the one who builds a better legacy than the one you were born into.